here we go. The biggest threat to public health today isn't the coronavirus or the Delta variant. Uh, can a lack of critical thinking endanger public health? Well, that's the topic that we're going to explore today. Blessings. I'm Dr. Edward C., and I'm running for Catholic Trustee in Calgary Wards 1, 2, and the beautiful town of Cochrane. Today, we're going to be talking about health and wellness, a key topic for schools in Calgary as we're entering this new phase of lockdowns, vaccine passports, and, of course, mental health challenges. Now, this notion that we're going to work hard in school, get a great job, maybe be promoted and then retire, it's backwards. Most people who are happy first are the ones who see the benefits later in their lives. And so today we're going to explore the happiness studies of over 275,000 people worldwide in the Happiness Advantage book. So if you don't know the Happiness Advantage book, I'd encourage you to go and check it out. I will also have links to it. It's in the Amazon Live, but I'll give you a sense. It's called The Happiness Advantage. So I'll write that there, and I'll put it into the chat here. Advantage. Hopefully that should go to everyone. Yes, there we go. Cool. Cool. So, now this Happiness Advantage book was written by Harvard professor and happiness expert Sean Achor. So today we're going to be covering 3 different topics. The first is health and truth. The second is personal wellness. And then the third is group wellness. I want to give you a quick reminder that we're live today. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, you're certainly welcome to post them directly here. We love getting questions. We love exploring what works best for you. And so we're very thankful to be able to have this opportunity, especially when we can't be meeting each other physically. Although as much as possible, I'm attending as many church services lately as possible. So this is a good opportunity for us to have that connection. Now, without further ado, I thought maybe I've got a lot to cover today, so I thought maybe today I'll jump right into it if you don't have any questions. But feel free to interrupt me anytime. Okay. Is that too fast? Yeah, that feels better. Okay. How should I do this? Can I do that? Aha. Always learning new ways to use the technology. Okay, cool. I like it. Okay, so this first topic, and how do I go into the chat? Here. So the first topic that we're exploring is called health and truth. Now, I've already said earlier that the biggest threat to public health today is not the coronavirus or the Delta variant. Can this lack of critical thinking be dangerous for public health? Now, I had a wonderful comment from Rudolph on one of my recent videos that I'd like to address live today. The comment reads, Edward C., we allow teaching in school a schism between religion and science, and instead of teaching the fundamentals of finding truth. And he pointed me towards a philosophical argument known as the Munchausen trilemma. Now, Munchausen states that scientifically, we can never prove that anything is true. Any attempt at proof falls into one of three different types of like pseudo truths, and applied to the question of, like, let's use an example, like the question of what makes us happy. For example, we're going to try to apply that. Okay, so one possibility is it leads to an infinite loop. We're happy because we're around people that are happy, but it's just like, what is happiness? The second is infinite proofs. Well, if I receive X, that'll make us happy. And then if I elect this person to government, then that will make us happy. Or we'll be happy when we achieve some particular type of goal. So that's the second one. And then the third is dogma. So we're happy because we know that God has a plan for our lives. Now, perhaps the schism between science and religion that we aren't taught in school is that they're both tools to get towards the truth. For example, a single scientific study can skew our view of the truth, and social media can put us in this realm of infinite loops or echo chambers, or infinite proofs, like, for example, like trolling. Oh, I don't believe you. Oh, fake news. When religion is no longer a mystery, then what we see on the internet is perceived as the truth. Like, this is the fake news example. Then we're, of course, in the realm of like submitting to dogma, and that dogma doesn't have to be religious. It could just be we're submitting to a dogma. But, and this is an important part, if we continue to explore science, then meta studies can get us closer to the pragmatic truth. So what is pragmatic truth? It's just like the truth that is good enough for us to live our lives. We may not know with 100% certainty that all of these things are true, but it's good enough that you should change your behaviors, right? So masking is another one. Like we don't know like 100%, but it's good enough that it can be treated as a pragmatic truth because there's meta studies on this. There's not just one person who studied this. Many people have studied this exact topic. In the same way, if we spend more time to question theology, we will more clearly see how those lessons apply to our everyday contexts. And so it is in this exploration of the truth, like what is the truth, that we start to really go deep and we start to actually get closer. We use these tools the way they were intended. So those, for example, in the faith side, those starting in the faith, they're referred to as inquirers. Inquirers, right? Like they don't refer to them as, oh, your candidate. No. They refer to them as inquirers. The sacraments themselves are referred to as mysteries. So faith, in this case, calls us to be shepherds and not sheep. And I've always interpreted this to mean that faith calls us to be scientists, to not accept a truth at face value, and to explore and think critically about what we see, especially on the internet. And so, what does this mean? This means learning to many diverse perspectives. Sometimes when you hear all of the different perspectives, that becomes part of you constructing like what is true. Sometimes when we go to Snopes as a solution of like, okay, this might be fake news, let me go and check it, then you find out, not looking at a single study, but maybe looking at meta studies that are repeated, and you start to understand like, oh, I'm getting closer to the truth, which is really our objective here. And I see this as like normally we see them as divergent, like, oh, like people are exploring, like, oh, obviously they must be in conflict. But I hope this is more clear in this explanation that religion and science are both tools towards getting to the truth. And it is in the deeper exploration that we discover it. It is not in this surface level, this lack of critical thinking that is very prevalent today, where the problem lies. It is the lack of critical thinking in general, not just about science, but also about faith as well, that is resulting in very like different or very extreme beliefs that may be out of context. Like if I took like one phrase like from a biblical text and then I interpret that to be the truth, well, then I'd be missing all the context of like what are the life of the people who lived in that time. I'm not really getting towards the truth. And so we need much more these days to move towards a type of truth that, like this exploration of truth that gets us closer. So that's the trilemma. Oh, I didn't have a chance to show the trilemma. So when it comes to the Munchausen trilemma on truth, I mentioned there's the infinite loop, the infinite proof, and of course there's the dogma. But it is only, and none of these are perfect. It is in the exploration, it is in going deep with each one of these that we start to discover what the truth really is. And so it's something that I think that this is important. I think this is important for our public health. I think it's important for so many aspects of our faith as well. And so I put these two things together because I feel that um, both of them are what's needed in order to really get us closer to a view that is like backed up by science, backed up by proofs, right? And also backed up by our faith. And so it's an interesting concept. But I think that more than just the virus itself, it's people's behaviors, it's people's attitudes towards just like I believe these things not necessarily because they're true or there's a lot of studies about it. That's not how they base their decisions. They're basing their decisions sometimes on it's inconvenient. It's inconvenient for me, and I don't want that. I don't want to hear that. So I hope that makes sense. So that is a little bit about truth, right? So this is truth and happiness. Oh no, health and truth, because they're related. Doesn't seem it. It should be completely objective, but we don't live in a completely objective society. You know, we need a little bit of balance in everything that we do. I hope that makes sense. I hope everyone's catching it. I appreciate everyone who's joining. I can see we have some people online already. Yes, wonderful. Just want to check here. Is that making sense? Yes, on Amazon. So this is health and truth. All right, cool. Yes. All right, so next up, here we go. The next one we'll cover is an area called personal wellness. And so this is exciting. I like this one a lot. And I have a lot to cover in this space. So bear with me here. Come on, is it showing yet? Yes, okay, good. Personal wellness. Okay. Maybe if I take this one and just adjust it a little bit lower, yeah. So like I mentioned, a lot of this, so I'm talking about personal wellness now. A lot of this comes from the book called The Happiness Advantage. So what is, like, number one, what is the happiness advantage? Well, in the book, they define happiness as the positive emotions that get us a chemical advantage for our lives through dopamine, serotonin that reacts inside our brains. Now, what this does is it helps us organize new information and it keeps that information in our brains for longer. Maybe you didn't know that. It has an effect on learning too. It allows us to retrieve it faster later on. It also helps us make those neural connections. It helps us think more creatively. It also helps us do more problem solving and, of course, invent new ways of doing things. We also, of course, when we're happy, we tend to perceive the world around us very differently. When we actually perceive not just differently, we actually perceive more of the world. Like we perceive more things around our world when we are happier. And so I thought that was a very interesting concept. Let's see if I can center it a little bit better. Okay, good. So this is the happiness advantage. And hey, you know what? Let me try something. This is an interesting. I don't know if I've done this before. Okay, give me a second. I gotta turn down this volume and go to my events. I'm gonna try something, see if it works. It may or may not work. I hope this doesn't interfere with the existing call, but that said, there's always going to be other aspects. I just want to see if there's a way. Okay, so now there's two of us. No, I don't want two. Mute. Okay, good. All right. So, perfect. So now I can take off. There you go. Oh, look at this technology. I love it. So I'll tell you about an interesting, when we're talking about the happiness advantage. So this is something like that was a fascinating study for me, was just offering doctors a lollipop prior to a diagnosis. What do you think that did? Like, did that help them? Like, did it help them? Did it hinder them? I'm curious. Like, let us know in the chat. What do you think it did? The interesting thing in this study was that offering doctors a lollipop before a diagnosis allowed them to come to the correct diagnosis in half the time of the control group. So there was a group of doctors, no lollipop, and there's a group of doctors with a lollipop. So they come with the correct diagnosis, so about the same accuracy, but in about half the time. So being happy makes a big, big difference to half the time. Now, what are ways that we can increase our happiness? Well, of course, individually, we can do things like prayer, meditation. We can find something that we can look forward to. So something in the future that we're looking forward to. I'm really excited about something that's coming up. And of course, acts of kindness and positivity in our own surroundings. And sometimes spending money, right? And so this isn't, I am not saying like, oh, okay, go out and do a bunch of shopping, but simple things such as going out and spending money on experiences that you have with others can make a big, big difference in terms of your happiness. And of course, when we have certain personal strengths, like things that we're good at, when we exercise those strengths that we have, those skills, those talents that we have, we also tend to feel more happy. And so this is an advantage. So this is the happiness advantage. All right, so let's go into the next one. This one is referred to as the fulcrum and the lever. So some of you may have already heard this. Archimedes said that give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. And what does this mean? Like this teeter-totter and this fulcrum? Well, the length of the lever is how much positivity we have. So the more positivity, the longer it is. And the position on the fulcrum, like whether or not it's hard to move or it's easy to move, is the mindset which we use to generate this power to change. Now, mindset is very powerful. In medicine, placebos are about 55 to 60% as effective as most medications like aspirin and codeine for controlling pain. Can you imagine that? Like, at almost like 50% as effective. Japanese researchers, they blindfolded a group of students and they told them that their right arm was being rubbed with a poison ivy plant. And interestingly, all 13 participants in the study reacted with classic symptoms of poison ivy, itching boils and redness, which is not surprising until you find out that the plant that was used for the study actually wasn't poison ivy at all. It was just a harmless shrub. And so our mindset has a huge impact on how we view the world. Now, and even the smallest tasks can be viewed with greater meaning when they're connected to our own personal goals and values. The more that we can align our daily tasks with our personal vision, the more likely we are to see work as a calling. And this is really interesting because this week I was at churches, and one of the mothers who came and spoke with me said, like, my son, he's right here. Um, yeah, he's enjoying like his uh, coding and robotics class, but school, he finds school to be really, really boring. And what I said to him was, well, my perspective is that there are no boring tasks, only boring imaginations. And it is our inability to connect what we're learning to our own personal vision, our own personal goals, that makes it boring. It makes us feel like this is not relevant to us. Why am I learning this at all? And so you're not going to see school as your calling unless you start to see how the stuff you learn in school relates to your goals. And so that is something that is very important, that covers the perspective of like, why is this so valuable? Why does this make such a big difference? And so what are ways that we can leverage this mindset stuff? How can we improve? What are things that we could do, practical things we could do to improve our mindset? Well, one activity that was suggested was just take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and then on the left column, you you write down all of the tasks that you just absolutely hate doing. Like you hate drawing, I hate mathematics, I hate these things, right? And then on the right, you write down all the things that are your goals as to, well, why do you think you're doing that? And if you write down the reasons on each and you draw arrows between the two, you'll find that it actually can really change your attitude towards these boring tasks. So that's an interesting one. So I like the fulcrum and the lever. That was a fun part of the book. And by the way, if you're just joining us now, we're going through the Happiness Advantage. This is a wonderful book written by Sean Acor, a professor at Harvard who studies happiness. And I like his perspective because it has many different components. He references many different authors as well. He's done big studies on this area, so that's very helpful. And so, Happiness Advantage. Now, the next one I'm going to speak to you about is something called the Tetris Effect. Okay, so Tetris Effect, what? What? So it was just an example. I think in the book, the author just refers to it as he was playing Tetris a lot, and then he would like walk out in New York or in some like city. I think he was in Boston, and he was just seeing all the buildings as like blocks of Tetris, and it's like, oh, wow, how much this affected his mindset, just like thinking like from that perspective. It can frame, like I think it's called framing in other fields, but it is a very important concept. And so, referring to the sculptor Pygmalion, Pygmalion could just simply look like he was this amazing sculptor. He could just look at a piece of marble, and he could see the sculpture that was trapped inside it because he had a vision like of his ideal, like let's say hopes and desires, and even the name of the woman who would be carved out of this piece of marble when he started. So like this this is what we refer to, um, and I like this because when our belief in another person's potential tends to bring that person's potential to life, it is called the Pygmalion effect. And our brain is this. Okay, so first of all, I gotta pause a little bit here because this is an important concept. Um, as a child, struggling myself with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I had a hard time in school. Like school was not easy for me. And what I do remember is that, like, for some parents, especially like Asian parents, it's very common where, like, oh, you're not getting the grades, and like they were very disappointed. But I never got that. My parents always believed in my potential, even before I believed it myself. And over time, I ended up believing it too. And that totally changed my perspective on everything related to education. It's why I work in education. It's why I'm running for trustee. It's why I've been doing this field for 15 years. It is my why. It is my why for education. And so I love this, and why I refer to it is I didn't even know about the Pygmalion effect. But it's true. Studies have shown that if you believe in someone before they even believe in themselves, they will adopt this belief. And you can totally change, as an educator or as a parent, you can totally change the direction of that child's future. All it takes is a little bit of faith. A little bit of faith in those students can make a world of difference. The reality is, people say like, "Oh, I'm just going to learn everything on YouTube. I'm just going to go watch a bunch of videos." Oh man. Hold on. Our brain is this amazing spam filter. Scientists estimate that we only remember 1 out of every 100 pieces of information that we receive. Now, when our brains constantly scan for focus, and they focus on the positive things in our lives, of course, we grow in our own happiness. We grow in gratitude, and we grow in optimism. So, for example, and this is a great example for you to try at home if you want to see how I'm going to apply this, is go and write down 3 good things each day for a whole week. Studies have shown that people who do this are less depressed at the 1-month interval, the 6-month follow ups. This doesn't mean we need to be blind to everything that's bad in our world and in our lives, but we need to have a realistic and reasonable and healthy sense of optimism. We can use positivity to help us see what is really going on in the world. And so this exercise, just write it down. Write down a few examples makes a huge difference, because when you write down those examples, like just for a week, like just try it 1 week, see what happens. You'll find that what did you have to do in order to write positive things? Like one thing I really try to do with my own children, before every single meal, I ask them to say one thing that they are thankful for. What are they thankful for? Yes, we can say like, yeah, I'm thankful for like my video games. I'm thankful for TV. Okay, right? But what would you like to thank God for? And over time, they get used to it. They get used to me communicating that there's an expectation that you're going to have to find something to be thankful for every single day. So if you can imagine, like you're my kid, then what's happening in your mind is like, oh, I got to look for something that's positive. I got to look for something that I'm thankful for every single day. Mission accomplished, right? You're changing their thought patterns. You're changing their attitudes. This is wonderful. This is what we want. So I think that this is a positive thing. And so again, like some really great thoughts here. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, and this one's called fail forward. So it's about what fail forward means, and I think he calls it something different in the book. I think he calls it like fall up. He calls it's about capitalizing on the downs so that you can build upward momentum. And of course, after every single crisis or adversity, there are 3 different paths we can take. One is no change, right? Nothing's going to change in our lives. The second is we focus on the negative and things get worse. Or the third is we focus on the positive, and this leads to growth. So after the March 2004 train bombings in Madrid, psychologists found that residents who experienced post-traumatic growth, right? You think this is such a terrible, horrible experience, but they experienced growth. That is, they had enhanced personal strength, they had more self-confidence, they had a heightened appreciation and greater intimacy in their own social relationships. And they also had increases in spirituality and compassion for others. They had better openness and even better overall life satisfaction. So, what determines the path is really how they conceived of the cards that they had been dealt. Some saw it as a blessing that they're still alive, and that means that they're being called to enjoy every moment, while others saw it as a tragedy, something that they couldn't control. Early failure is often the fuel for the very best ideas. And these are the ideas that eventually transform industries, they make record profits, and they even reinvent people's careers and their lives. For example, like Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor for being not creative enough. Can you imagine Walt Disney not creative enough? The Beatles were turned away by all the record executives who told them that guitar groups are on their way out. Guitar groups on their way out. Crazy. You know, I have a personal experience with this. My experience with chemistry in university was like this. Um, in my first semester as a major, I had broken more glassware than I had paid in tuition. I was so afraid. I was so crippled by fear. This totally impacted my mindset, and it made me less likely to experiment and to enjoy all of the creativity that exists in chemistry. And of course, it also led me to take computer science as a field that I perceived to as a safe place to, like, you can make mistakes with very little consequence. And I think that this is why that environment, that mindset, everything is so important, because that type of those small things, like I've got that mindset. We were talking about the fulcrum, right? So there is the length, and then there's the point, like the teeter totter point. Why is this important? It's important because it that mindset changes everything. Now, I hope that makes sense. The next one I'm going to refer to is, and something I've spoken about several times, is focus on the small goals, not the big one, not the in my life I want to have this and this legacy. No, focus on the what is that first step, right? There's that famous saying that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. What is that step? Understand that step. And there's another example that I loved. Like, some of you maybe have you seen the movie Zorro, the Mask of Zorro? Nutritional supplements, health and truth. Yes, Freddie just said nutritional supplements. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Again, this boils down to our understanding of health, right? How deep have we gone on that? How much critical thinking have we applied? I think that's a good point, Freddie. So, okay, let me get into this story. I love this one. So in the Mask of Zorro, a young and impetuous Alejandro has a quest to right the injustices of our world, of the world. He wants to do all of this immediately and spectacularly, and then the higher he flies, well, the farther he falls. And soon he feels completely out of control and utterly powerless. And by the time that the aging swordmaster Don Diego has a meeting with Alejandro, he's a broken man, a slave to drinking and despair. He promises Alejandro that mastery will come with dedication and time. And he begins Alejandro's training by drawing a circle with his sword in the dirt. And hour after hour, Alejandro is forced to fight only within the circle. As Don Diego says, this circle will be your world, your whole life. And until I tell you otherwise, there is nothing outside of it, just the circle. Now, of course, once Alejandro masters control of the small circle, Don Diego allows him to try greater and greater feats, which one by one he achieves. But none of those achievements would have ever been possible had you not first learned to master that small circle. And before that moment, Alejandro had no command over his own emotions. Like, he had no sense of like his own skill, no faith in his real ability to accomplish like a goal. And worst of all, he had no feeling of control with his own feet. Only after he first mastered that circle, like that first circle, then does he really start to become Zorro the legend. And I love this story so much because it relates so much to another book that I have included in the live stream called The One Thing. And I like The One Thing because it talks about like there are it's the small habits that you have over a long period of time that changes everything in people's lives. And if we can build those habits young, like it's just like success is really just a matter of time. That makes sense. So, yes, nutritional supplements. I love it. Okay. I'm going to keep going. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, yes. So the next is about habits. We're going to talk a little bit about habits. How do you turn like bad habits into good ones? Can we do that personally? Like, is there something that we can quickly do to turn bad habits into good ones? Would you like to know that? Well, here we go. People say that we're merely bundles of habits. Like, that's who we are. And I like the book, The One Thing, because it helps explain this concept like very clearly. What is the one thing that you can do that will make everything else in your life easier? What's the one thing that you can do? Now, the reality is our willpower depletes throughout our day. So that's why it's important to get your one thing done first in the morning. So, for example, by moving the TV remote upstairs and keeping the books near the living room where you would normally watch TV, like just adding those like those tiny little 20 seconds to your task, like it can gain you back 3 hours, of just sitting there and watching TV, being sedated. One parent, oh, I love this. One parent this week asked me, when is the right time to expose my kids to devices? And to them, I said, well, when is the right time for your kid to be creative? Okay, and we're back. I don't know what happened, but that's what happens. This is just normal. So this parent was asking me, like, when is the right time to expose my kids to any devices? And I asked them, well, when is the right time for them to be creative? And the reason I mentioned this was because this is interesting to me, because even the Pediatrics Association, they say like they used to say no screen time before 3 years of age, but what happened? They changed their mind. They said, well, if it's Skyping with the grandparents, it's fine. right? That's good for them. And so my approach has always been, well, what are you using the devices for? Are you using them for sedation? Are you using them for relating? Are you using it for creating? That matters. And so when we spend our time understanding how they're actually using it, that's very important. Okay. All right. Cool. So let's keep going. Yes. Let me see. Let me come back to it. Oh, yes. Yes. Now, another thing that I don't know if people have considered is that something simple as sleeping in your gym clothes, it makes it easier for you to do exercise in the morning. Like, so when you wake up, you're set to go. Like, I'm already in my gym clothes, right? So if you wanted to exercise, it's just like removing all those barriers reduces the amount of willpower that is required to achieve your one thing, your one goal. And so it is very important to look at what are the barriers. Is it just like we bought an exercise machine and we thought, well, do we put it in the living room or do we put it, in the basement? And we're like, well, those few steps that you have to the basement could be enough to stop you from using it all together. So that's something that's very important to consider. Let me just check. Are you still there? Yes, you're still there. Okay, cool. Um, so let's keep going. The next I want to talk about is something called group wellness. This is a whole different category, and this is interesting because, like, I was just talking about personal wellness recently, but in the same book, he actually covers quite a few concepts, and I split them all out for the group wellness. So if we just like, I'm going to run through these real quick. If we look at the happiness advantage, did you know that groups can experience this fight or flight just like individuals can? There is this concept called emotional contagion that applies to all groups. And so this is an important concept, emotional contagion, and I'll expand on it a little bit more. Now, the same, I was talking about the fulcrum and the lever. Now, researchers they administered this 20-question standardized test to more than 400 Americans, and on the first test, it was before the election of President Barack Obama. And in this test, blacks, of course, scored worse than whites overall. But the second test was taken shortly after the election. And what's interesting is that their scores improved so dramatically that the performance gap was entirely erased. There was no performance gap between blacks and whites on that study right after the election. Like, wow, like one person's success, like seeing this person who's leading the way can completely eliminate gaps. That's crazy. Three, the Tetris Effect. During a Wall Street talk, someone asked Sean Acor, the author of The Happiness Advantage. He goes, Sean, I know you're from Harvard and everything, but isn't all this a huge waste of time? I mean, isn't positive psychology just common sense? And of course he's like struggling to answer, and it's like, oh, how do I answer this? And it turns out another employee went up to speak to Sean afterwards and said, this guy is the most unhappy person here in our company. It's like this rain cloud follows over his head all the time. We can't put him on any teams because he's toxic. Now, this is the thing, is what he referred to as common sense is not always common action. You may have heard a bunch of things today, common sense, not common action. Not common action. When he said fail forward. Of course, crisis can be a catalyst for new ideas. Hewlett Packard and Texas Instruments were launched during the Great Depression. And you want a more recent example? Well, Airbnb and Uber were launched during the housing crisis, right? So these kind of things can make a big difference. A MetLife study found that those who described past events optimistically sold 37% more insurance, and the most optimistic agents sold 88% more than the most pessimistic ones. Right? 88% more than the most pessimistic. Just your optimism has so much difference. So optimism about past negative experiences between can be a big uh, hiring factor now at companies like MetLife. When it comes to focusing on those small goals, one study of 7,400 employees found that those who felt they had little control over deadlines had a 50% higher risk of heart disease than their counterparts. I mean, this is as great a risk factor for heart disease as high blood pressure. Just like not, oh, I don't have control over the deadlines. The deadlines are constantly changing was enough. Like it was the equivalent of having high blood pressure in terms of heart disease. Crazy. Of course, habits. Like I wonder if our social media creates a type of learned helplessness. Like in your IG account, you see all these perfect posts, or Instagram, like, oh, this person is going on this perfect vacation. And it just makes you feel terrible all the time. Um, like it's one of the reasons why it's so important to like spend money on these experiences, not on things. And it takes about 3 positive experience to fend off the effects of one negative experience. And we've studies have shown that teams produce their best work when they have 6 positive experiences for one negative experience. So how many positive experiences do you have in your work? How many positive experiences do you have in your school? That can make a huge difference. And now there's this one category which I put purely into the group awareness, and that's called social investment. Why social support is your single greatest asset. Now, when we encountered an unexpected challenge or threat, the only way to save ourselves is to hold on tight to the people around us and not let go. A study of 24,000 workers found that men and women with few social ties were 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from major depression than those with strong social bonds. So the reality is, people who invest in their social support systems are better equipped to thrive even in the most difficult circumstances, while those who withdraw from people around them effectively cut off every line of protection that they have available at the very moment when they need it the most. That's why these communities that you have, this community in school, this community in church, those are important communities. A 70-year-long Harvard study of men found that the social bonds weren't just predictive of overall happiness, but they're predictive of eventual career achievement, of occupational success, and of their income. Like it would predict their income, right? So your connection, um, what is the phrase that I've heard? Your network determines your wealth. Your network determines your net worth. Yes, your network determines your net worth. The income that you have is determined based on the peers that you have, right? So this is group wellness. So it is an important thing. I'll give you a bunch of examples. So Thomas Edison, he had a group of 30 assistants working with him when he invented the light bulb. He was a social creative and not a lone wolf. You think like, oh, it's just one person in a base. No. Leaders committed to social investment also, they get moving, literally. The idea of managing by walking around was popularized in the 1980s by Tom Peters, who apparently learned this practice from Hewlett Packard. It's interesting, like just physically walking around, like that physical connection that we have with others is very, very important. Jim Kelly, the CEO of UPS, said, "I don't even know the phone numbers of the people on our management committee because I never pick up the phone. If they're in the office, I just walk over to each other's offices when we need to talk." And this is one of the major, major challenges of remote learning and remote working that we had to work so hard to look at providing solutions for at St. Isidore when I was the school council chair there. We need to come up with strategies for people to get that social investment. In the book called Connected by James Fowler, he estimates that there are nearly 1,000 people within 3 degrees of most of us. There's like 1,000 people that we impact. And the reality is, by trying to make ourselves happier and more successful, we actually have the ability to improve the lives of those 1,000 people around us, those third-degree connections as well, right? Because we're happy, we impact that other person. Like there's a knock-on effect. So, for example, just give you an example. Like, just try this in a conversation with somebody. Show absolutely no emotional reaction. Do not get angry, sad, or frustrated, and don't smile or laugh. Go completely blank. Show no emotion, no matter what. Look at the reaction that they have. They'll be questioning themselves, right? And then try looking at the person like in the eyes and smiling at them genuinely. Virtually no one can refrain from returning the other person's smile. And you think like, oh, I've got a mask on, they can't see it. No, they can see it. They can see it. Like there's elements in our facial expressions that they can see. That is the concept of emotional contagion. We can spread happiness or we can spread negativity to others. So, the very important concept. Just as Copernicus discovered that the Earth actually orbits around the sun, recent advances in positive psychology and neuroscience has basically taught us that success revolves around happiness. Happiness is the sun, not the other way around. We think, oh, we'll be successful, then we'll be happy. No, that's wrong. So, by making changes within ourselves, we can actually bring the benefits of the happiness advantage to our teams, our organizations, and everyone around us. So, that was the main thing I wanted to share today. And I think really for me, I want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for attending today. It's a little bit longer session. Sorry, we had a hiccup in the middle. I don't know why it crashed. um, but I want to let you know that our site. So if you want to learn a little bit more, you just go to edwardtse.com, edwardtse.com. We now have our videos. So the videos like these ones, what we do is we break them up, we turn them into 60-second clips, and they're now available on the website. So you go to edwardtse.com/blog, then you'll see all of our blog entries, these 60-second videos. And I want to give you a little bit of an update. We've got our email system set up. In the email update, what I let them know is that we started to visit churches and schools. And you might start seeing some more of our signage available at the churches and the schools. We are very careful to make sure that we follow every single regulation. And so I want to thank you all for the support that you provided for this campaign. Just to get the signs out and to make sure that we get the message out, because this is important. kids' futures is important, and we need to very much find out like who is going to best prepare our children for the future. Um, some people, like even when I went and visited the churches this week, I was at St. Bernard's and Our Lady of Assumption. We would have, like, of course, the signs, but we would also have like a little iPad out, and it would just be playing those videos on repeat. And we had several parents and teachers come up to us say like, "Wow, like I really resonate with this video that you shared." And I'm so glad to hear that, right? Like a lot of people, like maybe they don't have time, or they're kind of a little bit shy. They don't want to have a conversation, but they at least can watch the videos, and then they can get some sense of what the candidate is like. That is wonderful. And so we want to make it accessible for everybody, and that's why I'm so thankful for everybody for getting the message out. Now, the last is about getting involved. And so one thing we're noticing is that there's a lot of people in a very short period of time. It's obviously a little bit less because of the restrictions, but people want to be in person. Being in person for church services is very important for many. And so we're very thankful to those who can help out during that time. So, for example, if you're able to like be at the church, when we are there to help, provide some of we have some pamphlets, or uh, we have a variety of different tools that can help our campaign a lot. And of course, we have the iPad there, like it'll play the videos, it explains stuff. We have posters and stuff, so you're all set. But having another friendly face can make a big difference. So we do appreciate that. Yeah. So we've covered quite a bit today, and I think that really the key takeaway is that when it comes to our students, student wellness needs to focus more around happiness. And we need to introduce the happiness advantage to our children and also to our parents. And when we do that, we'll find that everyone is more successful. We will have positive effects on others. And this is not just a biblical teaching. This is science, right? And it isn't this like separation between the two. It is often the science and the faith side. They say the same things, just in different ways. And so, with that, I want to thank you for your time. Of course, if you have a question, or there's something that you're curious about or you're wondering, just post a comment. We'll respond. Maybe not in today's live stream, but in a future one. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's good to be able to share some of this. These are things that I am really passionate about. Like I said, like every single one of my campaign platform topics, I can easily do an hour plus live stream about, just because there's just so much to talk about, right? Like you'll never cover it all. Of course, another good reference might be Angela Duckworth's Grit, but I think that beyond just like the growth mindset, I think that it's one aspect of it, but really, if we look at like the bigger goal, I think happiness advantage captures some of the elements of growth mindset, but it goes a little bit further to talk about, okay, let's talk about happiness. Let's talk about specifically what is it that is causing happiness. What is the impact that it has on others. I think this is Sean Acor's book is actually quite beneficial for that. So I think that's another aspect I think is very important. Okay, and so again, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate you. We are looking forward to connecting with you, hearing from you, and we're here for you. We're here for your kids as well. We're here to support them, to give them best possible future in a world that is constantly changing. I spoke with several parishioners today at St. Bernard's and Our Lady of Assumption, and in our discussions, I asked her, like, well, you must have been to this, like, attended this church for a long time. She's like, yeah, absolutely. I've been here for since since it was built in the 1950s, 1960s. Wow. And so I asked her, like, so stuff must have changed a lot from the time when the church was originally built. It's like, yeah, this whole place was just fields. I'm like, she lives in Boness, it is a well-established community now. And I'm like, yeah, in the same way, our society, our world is going to change just as much. And we want our kids to be ready for that eventual future. And they can't be ready if they're not well. They can't be ready if they're not healthy, and if they don't have this kind of drive towards uncovering the mysteries, uncovering the truth, being like a scientist, critical thinking. And so these are the reasons, these are the things that drive me as a Catholic trustee. I look forward to sharing more with you. I think next week I may cover a little bit more about I've already covered defending Catholic education, reconciliation, future ready skills, and today health and wellness. But I think I'm going to cover diversity and inclusion, because that was one question that one of the parents asked me. It's like, what do you even mean? Like, what is diversity and inclusion to you? And I think that this is an area that I can really speak to. I have a very different perspective on diversity and inclusion, and you'll find for every single one of the campaign points, I have a very different perspective than most candidates and most people, because of my background in technology, because of my background in thinking. Like, I constantly think about the future for my children based on what I am familiar with my PhD in computer science. And it makes me see the world and where it's going in a very different light. And I want our children to be prepared, right? When, children for example, in China, they're learning AI in kindergarten, right? Like, they're learning in kindergarten, going all the way up to like grade 2. We need to learn. We need to learn a lot more about AI. We need to learn statistics. Like, I think there's certain fundamentals that we need in order to be successful. And so my goal is to figure out what are those things, what are the parts of the curriculum that we need to add in order to be successful. But doing it all grounded in our Catholic faith, because it is those values that gives us a place to stand. Our values, our morality, our virtue, that is our foundation in this world that is going to be constantly changing, constantly shifting. In the fourth industrial revolution, it's all about creation and destruction of companies, right? And so in this world where things aren't going to stay the same, what is our foundation? Where do we lean on? So that's where this is going to come in. And diversity and inclusion is a big part of that, right? It's the same. It's very similar to I talked about health and truth. You'll find that there's a lot of the same things. Is when you get more perspectives, you get a better sense of the health and truth. Okay? So with that, I want to thank you again for attending. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping we're all learning together, and we are doing the best that we can to support our children. Thank you. We will see you all next time. Bye-bye.